In this tutorial, we're going to be painting a flower bouquet, and we're going to be using one of my very favorite styles, and that is painting with watercolor and then using a black pen over it. It's really fun, and it's also really forgiving if you're new. It's also great for your sketchbook. This is my sketchbook. I love it. It's Strathmore, and I can use watercolor in here as well as pens. So let's get started. Now, if you have a archival black ink pen, you can paint over this and it will not bleed. But since I know not everybody has that, I'm actually gonna paint first and then we're gonna draw over it with the pen. But if you don't have one of these pens, I highly recommend the Pigeon Letters Monoline pen. It's fantastic, it's waterproof, and she's an artist, so she designed it perfectly for artists. It's really great. Okay, let's get started. We're gonna use some pinks and like light shades of blue today, and as well as kind of like orangey blush color. So mix up some of those. So I have this color right here is Opera Rose. I really need to fill up my trays because they're getting pretty empty. So I have Opera Rose. I also have, I believe that this orange is Marigold Orange, but any orange or pink that you have. We're gonna use some warmer tones today because they're invigorating and they make you have energy when you look at them. So that's what we're gonna be using. But I also want to bring in a little bit of blue just to add a pop of color. And I have a turquoise over here that I'm going to be using. We don't need to worry too much about the details with the watercolor because we're going to be going over it with ink. So you'll be able to add a lot more detail with the ink. And it's a fun style to do just really loose watercolor, not worry about it being super detailed, and then come in with a black pen. Last thing I want to do is we want to have yellow. My yellow is basically green right now. We are going to want a green as well. So wake up a green in your palette. Something that's kind of a bright green. It's almost springtime, so we're using more bright colors. And it helps me clean off my yellow a little bit. So I'm gonna mix a yellowish color just for this. We're gonna do some daisies. So just for the center of the daisies. All right, we can get started with putting paint on our paper. What I like to do, we're just gonna do a light bouquet, is start off with 2 big blooms in the middle. Like I said, do not worry about detail. What I'm gonna do is just come in here, and they're gonna be like roses. So I'm literally just pressing my brush down so it fans out and then lifting up. So there are these little kind of petals. But what I really want is just something that looks circular because you're gonna see what we're gonna do in a little bit. So don't think about it too much. This is really good for mindfulness if you want to just come in here and kind of just paint shapes. Like we're just painting a big circle. Right now you might think that looks ugly. Don't worry about it. It's gonna look different in a little bit. Something though that you can do is to add more interest is just dot in some more saturated paint. And I'm gonna say this like 1,000 times, but don't worry about how it looks right now. That doesn't matter. Now I'm gonna grab a color that's a little more blush tone. So I'm mixing a little bit of that orange with the pink. And we're going to do something similar down here, kind of the same shape. This is gonna be another rose. I'm just making little petals in a circle. Maybe I wanna add in, just because this is all wet, if I add in a little yellow, it's gonna bleed a little bit. Awesome. Now I want to add in some of those daisies. I'm grabbing yellow and I'm just going to make a center. So you know how the center of the daisy is really little, or really yellow, I'm just using the tip of my brush to make these little circles. Maybe we'll put one up here. Then I'm going to grab a really, really, really watered down bluish gray, and just with the tip of my brush, lightly put these little lines. So think of these as your petals, but we're just gonna put the color on one side of the petal. It's okay if it bleeds. The yellow is gonna bleed a little bit because the yellow is still wet. That's okay, we don't have to worry about that. That is a really big petal, don't worry about that. This is all about not worrying about what your painting looks like and just having fun with it. That's why I love this style so much. Okay, so we have our daisies, we have 2 big blooms, and grab your green and we're gonna put in some stems here and some leaves. So the stems, I'm just using the tip of my brush. I forgot to tell you guys, but I'm using a size 8 brush. I recommend using a size 6 or higher, just because we're filling up the whole paper and you wanna make sure that you have a brush that's a little bigger. And I'm just making some lines of where the stems would go. I'm gonna grab a slightly darker color and maybe make the green touch a little bit. It bleeds, that's fine. As you can see, it's bleeding a little bit here. We're totally cool with that. I want to add in some leaves. I'm going to go back to that green color, and I'm going to use the side of my brush and just kind of press down. So I'm pointing, pressing down, pulling up. Some of these I want to look a little different, so maybe I'll press down. So there's like 3. So 1, 2, 3. This can be totally messy, does not matter. And like I said, I wanted to add in some little blue flowers, and how I'm gonna do that is grabbing that blue color. I'm actually going to make this color a little purple because my turquoise is really, really bright. So I want to bring it down just a tad. And then I'm going to make sure you don't have paint dripping off your brush, just using like little teeny dots. So this is going to be like a cone going up. At least that's my vision for it. So I'm making just these little dots in a circle, but they're going up a cone. And maybe for symmetry purposes, put a couple over here. Then I'm going to grab a darker green, and I'm just, with the tip of my brush, going to connect them like they're on a little branch. And or if it's okay if they bleed, maybe making just some little branches kind of sticking out here. All right. It looks good. If you want, you can come in here and add a little more layering if you want, but that's not what today is about. I'm gonna add just a little more golden tone to these centers. Make a little shadow underneath them. And we are going to let this dry. Now, the reason we're gonna let this dry is because if we took this pen and started drawing over it, one of 2 things is gonna happen. Either the pen's not gonna show up because the paint's gonna get stuck in the pen, or it's gonna tear our paper because our paper is wet. Now, if we did the opposite and we drew with this pen first, we would be able to paint all over it and nothing would happen. But since not everybody has the archival pen, I wanted to make sure that this was accessible to everyone. So we are going to let this dry, and then we're gonna come back and add our lines with the pen. We are back and everything is dry. So now we can come in with our monoline pen and add details. If you want, you can pull up a photo of a rose. However, I'm just going to start drawing. The center of the rose is the tightest petals, so everything is going to be pretty tight. I recommend if you feel really lost right now, just bring up a picture of a rose. I'm just lightly sketching in how the petals would be, so going around the center. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is kind of a more abstract way to paint things. Then for these little petals, just gonna make these look like tiny little, what are those, forget-me-nots? So I'm just making them little teeny petals all the way around the little black center. And then I'm gonna outline these leaves and the branches. This should feel really light and sketchy, not anything too serious. Don't be afraid to just like kind of get into the flow and do whatever you want. Personally, I don't think you can mess this up, but that is just my opinion. You guys can tell me what you think after. Now when we're doing these daisies, I don't want to draw just a straight circle. I want it to kind of be a little jaggedy. So I'm using short, kind of like hash marks to go all the way around. Then I'm gonna put some dots. And this is actually, it's called stippling. I think that's the word. And if you want it to look darker, just make your dots closer together. And then if you want it to look lighter, make them further away. And that's just a fun way to add interest. This would be like pollen in the center. Then when we go around, now we have to outline our daisy petals. So I'm just using that motion where I'm not drawing just a straight line, but I'm doing a line and lifting, doing a line and lifting. And I'm going to make that daisy petal shape. Then I'm going to make those veins that you often see in petals, just slightly. Make some coming from the top. And I added a little V right here and kind of darkened it because maybe that's where the petal kind of tips in. I'm just gonna do that all the way around. So you don't want every single petal to look exactly the same. That's not how nature is, but you want them to look similar. Just go around, and some of them have more veins than the other ones. And that shadow is just your guideline of where the petal starts. Now for the leaves, if you're having a hard time envisioning what this should look like, pull up photos of flowers so you can see where the lines are. Otherwise, if you don't feel like you need that, just have fun with it. Put them wherever you want. Again, we're doing the center of that flower and then the petals. And this one is getting a little, there's some areas where like, well, that doesn't look realistic, but that doesn't matter. This isn't a realistic rendition of a bouquet. This is whatever you want it to be. Same thing over here, those little flowers. So I just go through and I envision what I think goes there. If you wanted to all of a sudden make this a pink leaf, you totally could. You're dictating, I mean, we kind of dictated what things were color blocking when we painted, but now you have the pen and you're able to do a lot more details and make those details kind of be whatever you want them to be. Like these little flowers right here, you could just do a bud if you wanted them to be buds. But I like, you know, having them be these little tiny flowers with a center, and then just outlining those little branches. We have our daisy again over here, stippling. I did a whole series on this for my print shop, and I did cottages, and it was so much fun. I think it was last Easter I experimented with this style because I felt really kind of trapped in my own style. I thought, well, I'm a watercolor artist, so I can only paint in the style that I've been painting in for a long time, which is super layered. And then I just let myself explore, and I found this whole new style that I really love and enjoy. So I encourage you guys to do that as well. Please let me know if you like this style or if you've ever tried it before in the comments. I love to hear your artistic journey. Okay, we have another daisy here. I'm gonna do a little darker. And like I said, I really like this pen because what I like to do sometimes is draw with it and then paint over it. And it's so nice that it doesn't bleed or anything. Some more leaves, put veins in your leaves, make them look more realistic. As you can see, I'm not worrying about hugging this painted line perfectly. It can be a little bit off, it doesn't matter. And our last rose, I think I'm gonna make this one kind of tip to the side. So all these big old petals and little teeny petals right here. When you're doing the roses, just make sure it's all going around a center area. So that'll be your anchor and kind of tell you where to go. And if you want, you could put in some little like wrinkles if you want to, but you don't have to. All right. And that's it. Isn't that fun, you guys? It's such a fun way to explore ink and watercolor, and it's also a lot quicker because I typically paint in the layered style. This is a lot quicker. So make sure you sign your artwork. And if you guys enjoyed this tutorial, please let me know in the comments. Also, if you are on Instagram, please post a photo of your work. I love to see it, and tag me at Lavender and C. Like I said, I love to see what you guys create, and I hope you have a wonderful day.